Right, let's kick off with a couple of questions on housing. Here is one from Graham, who gets straight to the point with his question. Labour's big plan to build new homes, is it happening? Andrew?
Well, the homes aren't actually happening yet, but the preparation for it is. I mean, these things take time, not very much time, but, there is a big planning law coming, which is going to sweep away quite a lot of the barriers. Labour have made clear they're going to build on the edge of the green belt, what they call the grey belt. So I think the determination is there. But the scepticism is also justified. It's going to need a lot of people and a lot of money from private enterprise to start to get this going. My guess is that by the time of the election, we will see the beginnings of new towns and quite a lot of housing spreading around the southeast and outside London in particular.
Our colleague, business editor Will Dunn, wrote about this at the beginning of the month because obviously the government has made a really big commitment to building 1.5 million new homes by the end of the Parliament, as Andrew said. But Will was reporting that construction output and the plans in the pipeline for new homes in the UK are actually declining at the fastest rate since May 2020.
So I think there is a reason that the policy was 1.5 million homes by the end of the Parliament, rather than dividing that by 4 or 5 and saying this number of homes per year, which is that the government is expecting a lot of the progress to be made towards the end of the Parliament, and now is where they're sort of setting the planning rules and trying to get the investment to make that happen. Also, if you talk to Labour MPs, they'll say, look, if we build 1.4 million homes and we're slightly under the target, the target is there to try and get us moving. If we don't quite hit it, we'll still be way ahead than if we hadn't had that target. So I just thought that I would throw that in there. But there are lots of factors that are not to do with planning. Planning is a huge one. I think it's really important that the government is redesignating land, particularly around stations, where there'll be the least environmental impact and the sort of highest economic impact. And also a lot of which we talked about before, a lot of the green belt designated land, it's not actually green, and it's not, beautiful rolling fields, it's disused car parks and service stations and all of that kind of thing. So ripping up the planning laws and making there be fewer points at which locals can challenge NIMBYism and fewer points where organisations sort of get involved and say we don't like these plans for whatever reason. All of that is good. However, you still need the money to invest in it. You need people in the construction industry. We have a massive shortage of construction workers in this country. You need materials. The price of materials have sort of gone through the roof. Interesting point that Will Dunn makes is that Trump's steel tariffs could change the global market for steel and could have an impact on house building materials. And you also have to understand, I guess, that private developers build homes where they are most likely to be able to make a profit, which is not necessarily where the government wants them to be built, especially if what you want to do ultimately is bring the price of housing down. I do think that more housing everywhere, more densification, more new towns, more of every type of housing basically everywhere is what we need. But there are challenges with kind of every single one of those, and we're at the start at the moment. There isn't a trajectory yet where you can see, 1.5 million homes, that's going to happen.
Rachel's touched on another question that came in from Jonathan, Andrew, which is quite specific, but he's asking whether we need to build more densely populated housing rather than trying to take sort of
and
green
the short
land.
answer, Jonathan, is absolutely yes.
Both.
I used to know Richard Rogers, the late architect, who was a great advocate of this. He said, if you look at the really successful history of urban centres across Europe, you go back to the Italian towns of the Renaissance, you go back to medieval Germany, it's all about density. It's about people living close to where they work, being able to walk from one place to another, being able to eat, work, go to the market on foot. And actually, we need to get back to that. This idea that, it's not that every English person deserves their own home, but also their garden and the gazebo and the potting shed, and the eucalyptus tree at the end of that we have to forget that. We have to go back to, there are lots of very good examples of dense living. Old Edinburgh, some of the sort of Scottish tenement buildings were very, very successful when they were built. They then decayed. And we certainly have to go back, because what people need is to work closely together. They need to get back into the office. And we know that one thing we're not very good at in this country is transport infrastructure. We know the railway systems don't work very well. We know the roads get very, very crowded quickly and full of potholes and the rest of it. We need to be able to walk or cycle to work much more. That means much more density. So we have to be a bit more brutal about the shape of our cities. We have to accept that some of the sort of traditional city landscapes where you can look across the roofs and you see a spire or you see a dome and it's very nice, that's going to go. We're going to have many more high-rise buildings because we need them.
Well, and I wonder, I mean, just touching on something we were talking about yesterday with the nation's failing mental health, it's good for us, isn't it, to be part of a community as well? It might actually it's a good way to live with other people.
And we talk endlessly about, the mental effect of smartphones and loneliness. Actually, being in the real three-dimensional, kind of slightly smelly world where we bump into each other in real time, that's great. We need more of it.
I think it's worth flagging, though, because the way this question is phrased is like population dense housing, good and popular, taking away wild farmland, bad. There is significant local opposition anytime any densification plan hits a local council as well. And the one I'm thinking of is very, very close to where I used to live, which is the redevelopment of the old Archway Hospital, where it's been derelict for a decade.
It's North London.
It's North London. It's right next to a Zone 2 station. It's been derelict for over a decade. There are plans to build hundreds of homes, of which I think over half would be affordable, either social rent or affordable for key workers. And there is huge local opposition to this site that is completely derelict and falling apart. And one of the most vocal critics is the local MP, who is Jeremy Corbyn, who is fighting it because he doesn't think it's affordable enough. So I just think it is worth remembering that densification also runs up against the same local opposition that building a new town on some fields would do.
That's really interesting.
We're all in favour of houses, just not for other people.
Exactly.